Are we watching the last ever season in F1 for Lewis Hamilton? Has Oscar Piastri shown this past weekend that although Lando Norris won the race, he is the superior driver at McLaren? And how much do you reckon a hot dog costs at the Hungaroring? I think you might be shocked. This is On Track talkSPORT's weekly motorsports roundup, and we start with the On Track recap, looking back at this past weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix, as we go into the summer break with two McLarens battling it out at the front. But that's not where we're going to start today, because we need to talk about someone we talked about in length last week on this show, the seven-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton. I am John Jackson. Alongside me, as always, Piers, former British F3 driver and FIA F3 commentator, amongst other things, for Sky Sports. And you're listening to this or watching this either on talkSPORT 2, the talkSPORT Podcast Network, or on the talkSPORT Driving YouTube channel. So, Piers, I'm going to pose you this question. Is Lewis Hamilton, and he's going to quote himself there, is he absolutely useless?
He's not absolutely useless, but it's a bit awkward timing, isn't it? Considering last week we were discussing whether he was washed or not, kind of tongue in cheek. But then he goes out in Q2, then Charles at pole, and then he's calling himself useless. And it was bad as well, because even though the Sunday wasn't terrible, the race, even the post-race interview was still pretty hard watching him. And he's clearly not in a good place. He said that there's things going on behind the scenes that aren't pretty, and whatever's going on, it's not helping his performance, because he's really not up there, is he? And it's tough to watch.
It's a tricky one. So we look at qualifying, and obviously in qualifying, Charles Leclerc kind of came out of nowhere. We all assumed Oscar Piastri was on pole position. He put in a great lap to beat Lando Norris by, what was it? Not much at all, a tiny margin. And then Charles Leclerc comes out of nowhere and puts in an even better time by 2,000ths, was it? To get pole position. And Lewis Hamilton's down in 12th, but the gap between the top drivers is not much at this track. So it kind of looks a bit worse than it is, but going out in Q2 to go with what happened the week before, where Lewis Hamilton was also disappointing in qualifying, really doesn't look good at all. And then when it comes to the race, obviously Lewis Hamilton is nowhere in the race. I mean, he starts where he finishes and he finishes where he started. So we'll get on to Charles Leclerc and his issues and his rants down the team radio in a bit. But for Lewis, it's just not fitting together. Things aren't working for him. And we talked about whether he would be doubting his own ability last week. And, you hear from all these different sports people when they get to a certain age, and they will discuss whether you lose your sharpness, you're losing an edge, and racing drivers will talk about whether you're becoming slightly slower, maybe your reactions aren't quite as good, you're losing a tiny bit of time. And obviously, given how close all the drivers were in qualifying, when it comes to time, a tiny bit of time is a huge amount of time. Do you think Lewis Hamilton is starting to consider that maybe he's coming towards the end of his career? I know he knows it's not too far away, but could it be coming a lot quicker than we think?
Do you know what? I'm genuinely considering at this stage whether he's going to even do next year. A lot of the talk is he needs the 26 regulations to come. He needs to start next year strong. But yes, I'm sure he wants to go and challenge for the championship in 26. And there's hopeful that maybe if the change of regulations helps him. But at the same time, he's clearly not enjoying himself. I mean, he's still a human being. Yes, he is an absolutely immense athlete and has won equaling the World Championship records, breaking pretty much every other record, but he's still a human being. And if he's not enjoying it that much, I mean, think about it. If you're in your job and you're hating life that much, do you even want to do it? Is it time for a change? He's changed business, but maybe he needs to change career path. I don't know. And it's hard to sort of imagine, isn't it? Formula One without Lewis Hamilton. We haven't had that since 2006, which is mental. But it's clearly not working for him, and it's a real shame. And Hungaroring is a circuit that statistically and generally he's been very strong at. He's normally had the upper hand on his teammates. Actually, I don't think qualifying was horrific for him up until it came to the point he was knocked out. I mean, he was only 0.2 off Charles in Q1 and then 0.3 off in Q2, which is not huge. Still, Lewis Hamilton in his prime would not be 0.2 off anyone. So I think there is an argument to say that there's something missing there. And 0.2 doesn't sound like much, but as you already mentioned, at the Hungaroring, times get pushed together just by the nature of the circuit and the fact that it brings people together. I mean, in the Porsche Mo1 Super Cup that I was commentating on at the weekend, 2.5 tenths would have seen you down in 12th place, and half a second would have seen you down in I think it was like 17th or something like that, something ridiculous. And that was another event or another race on that weekend. So 2/10 there may have been 4, 5, 6/10 at other circuits. So yeah, it's inevitable that any sportsman is going to have a decline with age. How far has he declined with age? Is it other circumstances? It's hard to tell. That's the thing about motorsport, is there's so many variables. But then it's also, on the flip side, you've got a driver that's older than Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, having an absolute killer weekend.
Yeah, coming fifth. I was just looking at some of the drivers that finished ahead of Lewis Hamilton, and knowing what he's achieved and what we're used to with Lewis Hamilton. And I wouldn't say this if it was a blip, if it was a one-off, because obviously every driver can have an off day. But to be beaten by Ollie Bearman, Isaac Hadjar, Liam Lawson, Gabriel Bortoleto, Fernando Alonso's fine. I mean, Lance Stroll, they seem to have a really good weekend, which again, we'll get into. But just those drivers around him, and only to really be ahead of the cars that struggled this past weekend, the Williams, the Alpine. I mean, Kimi Antonelli is another driver we need to talk about in a little while. But, you know, those kind of drivers down there. Nico Hulkenberg had a pretty bad weekend as well. It's not where Lewis wants to be. And I think he'll look around him and think, okay, this isn't the story of the fairy tale of Ferrari when we saw him first posted outside the building looking like he was in the mafia. Looking at the quote he said after Q2, he suggested they probably need to change driver. I mean, he's saying that out of raw emotion, I'm guessing, but he's saying that the team are doing everything right, but he's the sort of the cog, the piece of the, what am I thinking, the cog that doesn't fit in or something? I don't know, the damaged piece in the wheel. There's definitely an analogy. It's too late at night for me to talk about this. But, you know, and you have to look at Charles Leclerc getting pole position and go, well, they're in the same car. So he's probably right.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because he's very self-deprecating and is, you know, putting a lot of the blame on himself, which is why he's been so good over the years, because he always thinks, right, sort myself out first. You know, he's always, if something's gone wrong, try and figure out what I can do. And he's looking at the other side of the garage, and Leclerc's on pole position, granted didn't have the best race, but still coming in fourth, scoring decent points, and he's down in 12th. So you can understand where he's coming from. But I think it's just an example of how important confidence is in sports, but also in motorsport, especially because you're throwing a racing machine around at hundreds of miles an hour through corners, is that you can have the skill, you can have the knowledge of how to do something, you can have the team around you can have the car underneath you. But, you know, similar to the Red Bull second seat, if you don't have the confidence, just either in yourself, your ability, the car, you don't trust the car, the foot margins are so fine that can be the difference between sinking and swimming. And we've seen it, we've discussed at length, you know, in previous episodes, especially the start of this year, the second Red Bull seat situation. I think there's similar things playing out with Lewis Hamilton. And Hamilton, you think, would almost be unshakable. He is the most successful driver in Formula One history. And just because, in my opinion, just because he's lost that confidence and the car isn't where he wants it to be, and then potential a little bit of decline in pace as well, it's just snowballing, but snowballing in the wrong direction for him. And it's so tough. And when he's saying, you know, the team needs to change the driver, that adds fuel to the flames, or fuel to the fire of the rumours that, you know, that he might not even be joining us back in 2026 with Ferrari, which would be strange to think about. But also then that opens up a whole nother part of silly season that we're yet even to get into.
You see, like, elite sports people say, I'm going to quote someone like Tom Brady, for example, they say that they know when it's time to retire. They say it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's maybe a bit of a shock when you are at the peak of your abilities. And someone like Tom Brady is a great example, actually. He's very similar to Lewis. Absolutely focuses everything he possibly can on fitness and nutrition and getting enough sleep and everything to be at his peak physical performance. And we know that Lewis is very much with that, with his vegan diet and how much he trains and, you know, how fit he keeps himself. But when Tom Brady kind of knew it was time to go, then he retired. Do you think that Lewis might be starting to feel this? Do you think that realization is really stepping in now?
Well, this is exactly why I think potentially we might not see him on the grid in 26, even despite the regulation changes, because I don't think, maybe he even thinks that if the car suits him, he could beat the likes of Charles, let alone whoever else, what other teams have got good cars. You know, if assume he's got the best car, he still needs to beat Charles Leclerc regularly to win a championship. he's not even looked like doing that really at any point this season. Granted, he won the sprint race in China. He's had blips here and there, but I would say they're almost the inverse of what we've come to expect from a world-class driver and from Lewis Hamilton. You know, Lewis Hamilton made a career and broke records by basically not having a day off. And we've said the same about Max Verstappen and George Russell, you know, that they're operating at the highest level because when they're on, they're unbeatable. But when they're not at 100%, they're still better or as good as everyone else. Whereas Hamilton at the moment is not even looking like he's on his good day. He's right there. He might be there sometimes, but then more often than not, he's floundering. And it's maybe the time has come. And it's hard. I've said it so many times. It's hard because I'm a massive Lewis Hamilton fan, and I think that I don't want this sort of situation and this year to tarnish how good he once was, or how good he is, or his legacy, because he was the world's best driver for a number of years. You know, without a doubt, he took it to Max Verstappen wheel to wheel for the whole season. Those two were in an absolute league of their own only 3-4 years ago. They were winning, you know, they were first and second with 50, 60-second gaps ahead of their teammates, and then everyone else was laps down. And now he can't even get into Q3 when his teammates on pole. It's, I think, exacerbated by the fact that at the end of the regulation cycle, everyone is so close, and then this weekend is then even closer still. But who knows? I think you're right. Maybe he's decided that this is the moment. You mentioned Tom Brady. I mean, I haven't followed American football at all ever, but I'm aware that Tom Brady is an immense athlete, the best of his sport, and then eventually reached a point where he was like, you know, maybe this is it. I think this might be the situation for Lewis. And if he does come back next year, will he come back with the hunger and the desire to win the championship, or is he going to come back with, this is my swan song, I'm going to try the new regulations, try and help the team Ferrari get a world championship, support Charles the best I can, and enjoy my last year in Formula One? Or will this be it for Lewis Hamilton?
Fred Vasseur. We saw a kind of an announcement post with all the talk of Fred Vasseur's future at the McLaren, at the Ferrari team, and we saw a kind of post that secured his future for the a number of years. I think it's a multi-year deal, isn't it? With, you know, obviously Christian Horner leaving Red Bull, people suggesting he might be going to Ferrari, and that's not happening. And we know that Fred Vasseur is a very important man in Lewis Hamilton's career, and he was a mastermind in bringing Lewis Hamilton to that team. How badly does it reflect on Fred that Lewis isn't performing? And when do you think Fred might have to make a decision and start thinking about the future for Ferrari?
Do you know what? That's a good point. I hadn't even considered that angle, to be honest, because I mean, I did quite enjoy the rumours that Christian had left Red Bull with 6 months, which would in theory be a gardening leave period, and then he could have joined Ferrari. But clearly that's not happening. Who knows what will happen to Christian? But on the Ferrari subject, Fred, I think he's the right person to lead the team. Hasn't brought them a championship yet, but they've looked like they've been improving year on year, and a lot of their weaknesses from previous generations, from almost decades, have started to get better. Their pit stops absolutely nailed. I think they did get the fastest or second fastest pit stop again this weekend. The crunch points in the race. Their strategy, while still sometimes a little questionable, and we'll get on to, I'm sure, the Leclerc situation in this podcast, but generally it's been much better. Considering how they were, you know, in the pits, and he's just a really good, leading figure in that team. He knows motorsport as well. He's not a businessman. He's not an engineer. He's a motorsport man through and through. Was with ART when Lewis was there in GP2. Knows Lewis well. Knows how to bring a team together. And ultimately, I think that's what a team like Ferrari needs. Leading with an engineer, maybe it's a bit too sterile for the Ferrari environment. Leading with a businessman, maybe they don't have the racing nous to be able to weave their way through. I like Fred personally. He's got a good sense of humour. He knows what is acceptable and what isn't. He puts his foot down when he needs to, but also enjoys having fun with it as well. Great to see him stay in the paddock, because I think he's the type of person that should be a role model for the teams, but also for people aspiring to be in the sport as well.
Yeah, we saw Fred's personality, I think, at its peak when he was having that kind of moment at Miami when Lando Norris first won his first Formula One race, and he managed to photobomb the picture. And it's kind of like a bit of banter between him and Zach Brown, which is always fun. But he is going to have some serious conversations. We've got the summer break at the moment, because there's pressure on him that if his drivers aren't performing, and obviously you've got Charles Leclerc performing to his best ability and maybe not getting the results that he thinks he deserves, but he's certainly outperforming Lewis. At what point do you think Fred does have to think about, okay, what's the succession plan to Lewis? Probably a little bit earlier than he was expecting to think about it.
Well, I'm sure he's already been thinking about the succession plan to Lewis, even when he signed him, because Lewis wasn't going to race for Ferrari for another 10 years. So he's aware. He's also aware that he's got a number of junior drivers in the junior program. He's got Ollie Bearman, who's already raced for Ferrari, but now in Haas. We've got Dino Beganovic in Formula 2, arguably having a pretty tricky season, so maybe not at the highest stock at the moment. And then in FIA Formula 3, Rafael Camara has just won the championship with a round to go, looking very, very impressive. And I think we're going to talk a bit more about that maybe afterwards.
Right now. We're going to do it right now. We're going to do it right now because let's talk, everyone says talk about what you know, and you were commentating on this across the weekend for Sky Sports, and Rafael Camara has been a name that has been constant throughout this season in F3, and we do have one more round to go, but he's wrapped up that title. And just explain the significance of what he's done in the last, it's not even 2 years, is it? It's kind of just over 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very, very talented young driver, Brazilian, very calm head on his shoulders. But he came fifth in Formula Regional, not last year, but the year before, the year that Kimi Antonelli won that, but was right there. And that was, I think, his first year in the championship. Decided to stay on for another year, broke pretty much all the records in Formula Regional, which is effectively the stepping stone before FIA Formula 3. Broke all the records, won that championship with races to go. Stepped up to Formula 3 this year, which is notoriously difficult to be successful in your rookie season because the limited track time you get. New car for this year as well. Granted, he was in a good team at Trident, who have won the championship the last 2 or 3 years, but he's come in and absolutely dominated. Pole, fastest lap and race win in the feature race of the first 3 events, I think. Won 5 feature races, which is the most anyone's ever done in a season. Most wins in a season for a rookie, most poles in a season for a rookie. Won the championship this weekend in Hungary with a whole event to go, which hasn't been done in the modern era of FIA F3. The last time that was done was by George Russell in 2017 in GP3, which is the previous version. And also, he's the first driver to go back-to-back winning Formula Regional Europe and then Formula 3 since Oscar Piastri. So, I mean, he's in very, very good company. He's won this championship with a round to go. He sounds like he's going to be racing at Monza, which is the final round of Formula 3. But who knows? He may take a step up to Formula 2 to get 1 round of experience if a seat becomes available. But it's almost certain he's going to be doing Formula 2 next year. And if he has a good year in that, then Fred Vasseur is going to be starting to think about who's next in line, because in theory, Rafa Camara is third in the line. You've got Bearman, who's already in Formula 1. Beganovic is currently in Formula 2 and not performing at the level that you would want him to get a Formula 1 seat. And then Rafa Camara. So Camara, if he does a good season in F2 next year, if he outperforms Beganovic, who's almost certainly going to do another year in F2 next year, then you've got a problem, because you've got these drivers stacking up, waiting for a seat to become available, who have got a lot of talent. They're hungry. They know they're fast. We've seen how good that good drivers can be, in the likes of Oscar Piastri, Bearman when he jumped in. So these drivers are going to be pressuring Fred, and Fred's also going to be thinking, right, I've got potentially, who knows, a bit of dead weight if Lewis Hamilton's not performing. Is Lewis Hamilton going to jump, or is he going to be pushed?
Well, I was going to say, if Rafael Camara has a good F2 season, then just think about his future following in the footsteps of Oscar Piastri. He might, try to get signed by Alpine, and they might claim that they've got his services for the next year. Then he might go and end up racing in F1 and leading the championship as Oscar Piastri is. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because then you go back to the argument we've discussed about Kimi Antonelli, where should Toto Wolff have gone down the George Russell route with putting him in maybe Williams and taking Carlos Sainz and giving him a couple of seasons, because Kimi Antonelli had another tricky weekend and results have not been fantastic for him. Still finished ahead of Lewis Hamilton though, but 10th place for Kimi Antonelli after going out of qualifying early on. I think he went out in Q2, didn't he? The same as Lewis Hamilton. I remember he had a lap deleted for track limits, didn't he? So Antonelli's kind of started off okay, but hasn't shown the superstar, generational talent performance that we've seen from, let's say, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri in the last few years. So who knows what his future looks like. If you were Fred, you would surely see what's happening with someone like Antonelli. If Fred, this is obviously theoretically, if Fred's making a decision soon, you would probably go with the safe option, especially given the performance and some of the issues Ferrari have had, and probably go with Bearman and promote him and then look to put, Camara or, of course, Beganovic into the Haas team, because that's the safer option, right? And Formula One is cutting edge of many things, but it's probably sometimes good to play it a little bit safe.
Have you ever read the book Bounce by Matthew Syed?
No.
No. Okay. So Bounce is about the fact that talent, in theory, the premise of this book is that talent doesn't exist, or if it does, it is a very minor factor in the performance of an athlete, or a performance at a skill, shall we say. And there's a lot of talent available. Kimi Antonelli, no doubt, I think he's probably one of the best drivers of his generation. It's easy to forget how young he is at only, 18 years old in Formula One. And that sounds like the norm these days when you've got Max Verstappen jumping in. But Max Verstappen had a very, very compressed junior career. And when he joined Formula One, he was in not a front-running team. He joined Toro Rosso and had some mistakes, made a lot of crashes and made some enemies, but then has built himself up to the absolute monster that he is today. So you've got a base level of talent which you can get you so far, but experience has a lot of value. You look at Rafa CＡMARA, he's 20 years old. So that sounds he's too old for Formula One because he's 2 years older than Kimi Antonelli, who's already in Formula One. However, Kimi Antonelli, once he left FRECA and won that, Rafa CAMARA then the year after beat Kimi Antonelli's records in FRECA, then has gone on to do F3, got a whole extra year of experience in Formula 3. If he does another strong year in F2 next year, he'll arrive in Formula 1 better prepared than Kimi Antonelli. Antonelli has shown at times this year he's got the pace, that's the talent, but building a race weekend, dealing with setbacks, having tough weekends, being able to come back and bounce back from it, build a championship. Kimi Antonelli's only had to do that once in cars because he did Formula Regional, Formula 2, Formula 1, and this Formula 2 season actually didn't go that well, really. I mean, I think he was in the top 10 mostly. I think was it 6th place or something like that, but
I feel like there might have been a lot of distraction for half of that season at least with all the talks of replacing Lewis Hamilton. So
and that
tells you how he might handle other situations where there's a lot of focus on him and it's all a bit too much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's wise to give drivers a chance to not only get the results and show they have the talent, but also I think it's almost a necessary step, in my opinion, having experienced, some of the steps on the single-seater ladder. Obviously, I don't race anymore, but I did race to a fairly high level. So I know what it's like to have good weekends, have bad weekends, what you need, the attributes you need. And now having been there and now watch it intently, Rafa CAMARA will be joining Formula 1 when he's 21, 22, maybe even 23 if he doesn't get straight into Formula 1. But I don't see that as a bad thing if you're a more complete driver when you get there. And I also think there's value in doing what Toto did with George Russell. He put George Russell in Williams. There wasn't a seat available, or didn't choose to put George Russell straight in the number one team because George Russell had, 2-3 seasons in Williams to get used to Formula 1, understand the weekends, get used to the media, the pressure, have bad weekends, have good weekends. The pressure's not quite the same as being in the main team. And then when he was straight into the Mercedes, he was absolutely ready for a chance to win races and challenge for championships. And he's, I think, performing one of the best of any of the drivers on the grid at the moment. Conversely, you've got an equally talented driver in Kimi Antonelli who's just not mentally equipped by the looks of it this season. He started off well, had a few blips and things are looking good, but then he's in a real slump at the moment. And it's, you can see it's physically taking a toll on him. There was, he was emotional in the interviews, I think after qualifying in Spa, clearly not enjoying things at the moment. But then if you can project that onto the likes of Bogdanovic for CAMARA, it would make sense to put them in the Haas, give them a bit of time and then promote it. Behrman's going to have the advantage of that. And, hopefully we see Behrman in the Haas, in the Ferrari at some point, who knows, maybe next year or the year after. And I think he'll stack up well against the likes of Charles Leclerc because he's had the chance to do the same in Haas and is stacked up very well against Ocon, who, let's not forget, beat Max Verstappen in his Formula 3 season. So Ocon's no slouch.
We haven't yet talked about the McLaren drivers, and that is because we've come to expect to see them fighting it out at the front every weekend, and that is exactly what they did. Lando Norris won the Hungarian Grand Prix. I feel like we haven't actually said that yet, but it was a fascinating last kind of 20 minutes of the race as Oscar Piastri chased him down, and it was all to do with one stop versus two stop. Lando Norris was on the one stop. He ended up having to do something like 38 laps on the hard tyre towards the end, while Oscar had the two stop, and he had 12 seconds after he came out after his second pit stop to make up on Lando Norris with 19 laps to go. And I think, we saw that they nearly came together on that penultimate lap. George Russell was joking about why didn't you just T-bone him, which was very good for George Russell to do while they were in the cool-down room. But that was what we want to see. We want to see the McLarens battling it out, and we want them to have to get a message saying, remember how we go racing.
Yes, we do. But if I was Lando Norris, I'd be happy that I won the race, but I wouldn't actually be feeling that good, no, deep down, because I think it's another weekend where Oscar Piastri's actually outperformed him. I think arguably, well, Belgium, of course, Piastri did. He won the race, was smarter, then dominated the race from there, took the lead. But arguably, the only reason that Norris won the race was because he qualified worse and then had a bad start and wasn't able to make progress. That was the only reason they were considering the one stop. A thought experiment, if Norris had got into second place and they were 1 and 2 and drove away from the front of the field, I don't think there's any way that McLaren would have put Norris on a one stop to try and undercut Piastri, because it would have been such bad, politics inside the team. I think they would have pitted themselves against each other in the 2-stop each or a 1-stop each, who knows, but probably looked like it was going to be a 2-stop. They would have given Piastri the preference of pit stop. He would have pitted first, had a couple of laps, then Norris would have pitted, and it would have been, we can't say that Piastri would have guaranteed won the race. Who knows? He may have made a mistake if he was pressured by Norris, and Norris could have overtaken, but the likelihood is it would have been a Piastri fairly standard win. It's hard to overtake at Hungaroring, which is why Piastri wasn't able to overtake Norris anyway. But yeah, it's close in the championship, but things are, as the season goes on, I think for me, looking actually more and more potentially like Piastri is more consistently able to perform, and sometimes things have out of his control have gone against him, but it's the laws of averages. Eventually things will start going for him, or those things that are unlucky won't happen, and they'll start happening to Norris. And I think Piastri will be annoyed but also encouraged by the situation as well.
I do like how Oscar Piastri in the McLaren social content always says well done to Lando Norris, but he always says it in his very dry way, and it sounds a little bit like he's saying it through gritted teeth, but I don't think he is. I think he is genuinely happy. But obviously go back 12 months to what happened at Hungary last year, and Lando Norris and the team radio and everything that happened there. It's there's a big history of the McLaren drivers having a little bit of beef with each other out on the track at this track. Lando Norris's start, that was something I wanted to talk about, because he lost 2 places on that start. George Russell and Fernando Alonso got straight past him. We've seen Lando Norris have some pretty off starts recently. A lot of focus is when he's on pole position, because there was the thing for a while, wasn't there, that when he's on pole position, he doesn't tend to lead at the end of the first lap. As a racing driver, why is it? Because every driver, I'm guessing, can practice as many starts as they want, probably not in the new car, but they can certainly practice on a sim, or they can practice with an older car. And given that he's so experienced in Formula One now, why is it that he's not getting good starts consistently? You'd think that, I liken it to when I learned to drive. I was rubbish at clutch control, so I just sat on my front, on my driveway, and just went backwards and forwards, just learning how to use a clutch. And eventually you go, great, and you do it. Now, I know that it's a reaction time kind of thing, but there's a lot more that goes into it, and I'm sure as a driver, you can give me some insight into why Norris struggles sometimes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's two factors in with the start situations with Norris. The start, initially the pull away, is basically the clutch dump and then the acceleration away. That's actually just a procedural thing, really. It's working with the team, making sure that you get the muscle memory, because you have to drop the clutch exactly the right point to get the perfect launch, and then manage how the power comes in. So that's kind of just grooving it and getting a feel for it. You can practice it, but there's only so much you can do. The bit that I think is actually more important, as long as you're not absolutely being rubbish at starts. I don't think Norris has had any horrific starts. He maybe loses a little bit of ground. But we look at the likes of Verstappen, especially. George Russell in the last year or so has been very good at starts, gaining positions. Fernando Alonso this weekend and also previously. These drivers are using the start as an opportunity. They're seeing it as a good opportunity to gain one over on their rivals. They're decisive. They are calculated, but willing to take risks, and they often gain positions. If you remember that amazing move around the outside of Barcelona that Russell did at turn 1. Russell this weekend as well, gaining positions. Alonso gaining positions at turn 1. You think about Max Verstappen throwing it up the inside, gaining positions at turn number 1. It's decisive. It's just so confidence. Whereas I watched Norris start this weekend, and he just breaks a little early. He's a bit risk averse, and it only takes you to be 10% more risk averse than the drivers around you in this sort of tactical battle where you're placing your cars in positions where you can try and gain and lose places. And then you're going to be the one, it's very eat or be eaten, dog eat dog out there. And he's just not at the moment pushing that hard. Potentially he knows he's got the car that is fast enough to pass the drivers around him. But especially when there's cars between him and Oscar Piastri, if he's going to beat Piastri, he needs to be with him as quickly as possible. So yeah, there's definitely something to be said about that. I think he definitely will be looking at that with his team. Whether there's anything he can do about it, I don't know, because your instinctiveness at starts is partially your outlook and your plan, but also somewhat intrinsic. Some drivers are naturally more confident and outgoing and risk taking, like a Verstappen, for example. We've seen him even this weekend with Lewis Hamilton. He's happy to stick a nose in and throw it up the inside in places where other drivers won't. I think he was the only driver that made any moves at chicane or made multiple or whatever. So yeah,
there was
I
one
think
move
Norris
on
needs
Lewis.
to be more decisive.
I remember that move on Lewis. I'm not entirely sure which corner it was at, but there was one. Yeah, there was one where he was like, well, we overtake into turn 1 and maybe turn 2, but I'll try and overtake where I want because I'm Max Verstappen, which is fine. I think Lando Norris only took him to lap 3 to get past Alonso, but you're already putting yourself on the back foot in a 70-lap race. You've got less chance to overtake. So I think what you're saying is that he really needs to be thanking McLaren and their strategy department, because in putting him on that one stop, and you would have heard the radio message where they basically said, Lando, we're looking at a one stop, you're going to have to do maybe 40 laps on the hard tyre. And he was kind of just, the way Lando responded was almost like a kind of, yeah, why not? Because nothing to lose, I guess.
Well, exactly. It was nothing to lose. But as I said, I think he was lucky to win this race. And I mean that respectfully, because I think Lando did drive a good race and ultimately made it work. But there was no way he was going on the one stop. If he'd have got through into second place at turn 1 and followed Piastri for the first stint, no way are they going to give them a different strategy. So again, the win actually came from his poor performance in qualifying, relatively speaking, and his poor performance at the start of the race. It's not exactly ideal, is it? So something he definitely needs to look at, because the laws and averages over a 24 race season, if you can get lucky 2 or 3 times when he won at Silverstone, when in theory Piastri maybe should have done. If you're being outperformed in these little areas by your teammate, eventually it's going to turn into points deficits. And at the moment, he's right there. Was it 9 points, the gap in the championship at the moment?
9 points.
So not really much
break.
Different. That's still there or thereabouts within a race win to second place. So we've got a long way to go. Who knows where it'll go? But, the drivers will be wanting to be ahead, but if not very much at the last race, within that, what's the point difference? 7, isn't it, between a race win and second? They'll want to be within 7 points at least, so that it becomes a 1v1 shootout and you don't have to worry about other cars getting in the middle. But that's a very fine margin when it is 25 for a race win. And all you have to do is have a couple of cars between Norris and Piastri a couple of times, and that gap will extend beyond that. And when you're not being able to pass cars at the start, that's an example of how you can let the championship slip away.
I think it's going to be very interesting when we come back from the summer break to see this battle really develop. Maybe they will come together again as they did back in Montreal. I think it's probability would suggest they may clash at some point. They nearly did,
didn't they? They nearly did.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was the other way around. That was Oscar chasing Lando.
That was actually a lot closer to a crash than I think a lot of people... I mean, we saw that it was close, but Oscar was out of control there. Both front tyres locked up. The only reason as a driver that you're locking both front tyres is because your brain goes, oh, bleep, I'm going to run into the car ahead. That's a panic mode when both front tyres lock. So that was not skill, that was luck. Piastri really trying to force the issue.
It was a real shame as well, because I think we all enjoyed watching Oscar chasing down Lando Norris. And had he not made that mistake, had he maybe backed out of that move a bit earlier on, then I think he would have had a better opportunity on that last lap to try and get him on T1. At Hungaroring. So obviously by doing that he lost a few tenths of a second, and that was that really, and Lando Norris came home. But I was really excited to see this. I was also really excited because I was there on Thursday and Friday in Hungary, and the support for Lando, I feel like it's ramped up in the last year or so, because he's got his design on his helmet, which is now everywhere. We saw it on the Lando stand, we can see it on the cans of energy drink. Everyone now seems to have Lando Norris design, I don't know if it has a name, I don't think it has a name, on everything. I saw a walking stick that was Lando Norris wrapped with that. I saw phone cases, there was something else I saw, that there was, I want to say it was like a dog coat, but it wasn't, there was no dogs there, but it was something else. It was, I can't remember what it was, but it was like everyone's got their little bit of Lando, and huge support for him everywhere that I've certainly watched F1. So I think that it's great that we can see, people expressing themselves. Not as much obvious support for Oscar Piastri. I don't know whether he's got as much kind of, branded stuff, but we did see a couple of guys with massive kangaroos, like stuffed kangaroos. Imagine they've come all the way from Australia with these large stuffed kangaroos just so they can support Oscar in the crowd. We were having a debate as to whether you could buy a stuffed kangaroo in the Budapest area, and we decided it probably wasn't very likely, so they will have actually, if they were from Australia, brought them all the way across, which it begs so many questions of where do they go? Do they go in the hold? Do you put them above you? Or do you have to buy a seat for a stuffed kangaroo because they were quite big? I digress. We need to talk about some of the other standout performers for this past weekend, and that I alluded to before. We have to start with Aston Martin. Fernando Alonso coming 5th, Lance Stroll coming 7th. Where did that come from?
I have absolutely no idea. They've been rubbish, haven't they? Let's be honest. I don't want to beat around the bush. They've been pretty much nowhere. And then this weekend, they've clearly got the low speed grip or the medium speed corners sorted, or they've done something on the car, or they've worked harder at just this track than others because they think it suits their car. So they've sort of put themselves in that. But whatever they did, they made it work. And Lance Stroll was with Alonso all weekend, which a lot of people will be surprised at. He is actually quite quick and can be good on his day. Sometimes he has off days, but this weekend was not one of those off weekends. Didn't finish that far behind Alonso, and then neither did he. About 10 seconds, which is behind a two-time world champion, arguably one of the most experienced and best drivers in Formula One. Pretty good. And as Alonso said on the team radio, they just need a few more race weekends like that, and they could be finding themselves well within the midfield hunt.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if this is true, right? This is just what I saw. I'm just going to tell you what I saw, because I was at Silverstone this past weekend with GB3, and on Sunday when I was leaving, obviously the race had been on Sunday, there were so many cars at the Aston Martin factory, which is on the way out of Silverstone. If you've ever been there, you'll know it's a huge, great facility that they've built in the last few years. And I did see a car with a Domino's kind of block on top of it, like people use their normal cars to deliver pizzas. And I like to imagine that they were so happy that they had some kind of massive pizza party to celebrate at the factory, because it was a fantastic result for them, and it took us all by surprise, but maybe not as much as Gabriel Bortoleto. We've seen Nico Hülkenberg get his first ever podium in Formula One a matter of weeks ago, but for him to qualify 7th and actually finish 6th in the race, just behind his manager and mentor, maybe I just combined the words there, Fernando Alonso. An absolutely incredible performance by Gabriel Bortoleto. And if we see RAFAEL CÂMARA in Formula One in the next few years, the Brazilians are going to be taking over again.
Yeah, this is what Chris McCarthy, the full-time F3 and F2 commentator, and I were chatting about on the broadcast. It's a good time for Brazilian motorsport. We've not had Brazilians fighting at the front of Formula One for a long time, and Gabriel Bortoleto is looking like the real deal, isn't he? He's really performing in this sort of maybe we should call it middle third of the year. He's really, really been on it. Granted, Hülkenberg, of course, got that podium, but essentially a bit of an outlier. But Bortoleto's out qualifying Hülkenberg, who's known to be a very fast one-lap driver. He's putting races together, and the Kick Sauber is clearly improving. But, he qualified 7th. Everyone probably thought in the back of their mind, good couple of laps, but we'll see you out of the points in the race, or we see you drop backwards. He went forwards one position, put a brilliant race together. Great. It's going to be amazing. And he's another driver. Don't forget that when Formula 3 champion, Formula 2 champion, that are joining the likes of Piastri, Leclerc, Russell. These are all the drivers that if you do Formula 3 and Formula 2 back to back, you're in good company. And who knows about CÂMARA? He's done Formula Regional and Formula 3. If he does Formula 2 next year, or is at least fighting for the championship, there's no reason why he can't be one of the best in Formula 1 as well.
I think the future, when we have some of the drivers that are likely to leave the sport, and Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, who are a little bit older, maybe Nico Hülkenberg as well, some of the younger drivers coming through are going to be seriously impressive competitors, as they always have been. But I think for Formula One, and I saw a stat the other day about how much Lawrence Stroll bought Aston Martin for in whenever it was 2018, and how much that team is worth now, and the explosion of interest in Formula One. For F1 have been very good at promoting things like F2 and F3 and the accessibility of being able to watch it on TV across the weekend, because now you've got these drivers coming through have already got massive followings as well, and people already know these drivers. You're not getting drivers appearing in F1 all of a sudden where you haven't got a clue where they are because you've not been able to watch them racing for the last few years or so. So I think that it's going to be fascinating to see some of these drivers stepping up. I have to also shout out having a positive weekend and doing it quite quietly after a very tricky first half of the year as we go into the summer break, is Liam Lawson was the highest performing Red Bull driver this past weekend, which I don't think we would have said a couple of months ago, would we?
Most people wouldn't, but I've always been very much on team Liam Lawson. I don't know, I don't want to be like, hey, I told you so, but I've said it before. I think he's one of the best. He's won in everything he's ever raced in. He's been given a harsh hand this year. 2 races at Red Bull? I mean, that's still stupid to me, to give a driver 2 races. And he's finding his feet finally. And I think hopefully he uses this to build some momentum and show what he can really do. And who knows, he might even give the Red Bull organization a bit of a head scratch about who they are going to put alongside Max Verstappen, because if things keep going the way they are for Yuki, he's not going to be there much longer, is he? I mean, he's having a torrid time as well. He's basically, when was the last time anyone's actually really spoken about Yuki other than, oh God, he's gone out in Q1 again?
Yeah, which is what I was about to say to you. I think this is an interesting thing. We are running out of time here, and there's a whole new conversation about this. But Isaac Hadjar's been really, really strong. But Liam Lawson is kind of now finding a happy place at Racing Bulls. And yeah, come the end of the year, when I think it is expected that Yuki Tsunoda is going to leave, because I'm hearing that Arvid Lindblad's going to be coming in at Racing Bulls, and one of the 2 drivers at Racing Bulls will be promoted to alongside Max Verstappen. Then it's going to be a tricky situation, because you're either going with another very young driver who could sink or swim and maybe sink, or you go with the guy that you did give it to 12 months ago who didn't get a fair chance, and you might look a bit stupid. But then if the guy that gave him that chance isn't there anymore, maybe you don't look so stupid. There's so much going on. The last thing we have to mention is Charles Leclerc. We saw a lot of messages, and probably the longest team radio message I've ever seen in Formula One, him just going off at his team. But he did afterwards kind of suggest that maybe there were things at play that he didn't know about with the car that were affecting the performance.
Yeah, I think George Russell alluded to the speculation about that with the plank wear. We know Ferrari have been disqualified for plank wear this year. We know that they like to run the car as low as possible. Clearly, it's very important to the performance of their car, and they went too far, which meant that Leclerc had nothing basically at the end of the race, and why he faded into insignificance. 4th place, still a good result, but he faded away from actually being with the McLarens. They're just clearly pushing the envelope a bit too hard, clearly trying to find the last little bit. But ultimately, if you're doing that at the detriment, if you're trying to go all eggs in one basket, so much so that you're having to take eggs out of another basket, is it even worth it? So therefore, I can understand Leclerc's situation, especially as a Formula One driver, when you know what the car needs to go fast, you know what the tyres feel like, you know what you think, you have the best understanding of how to build the race from the cockpit, and you're so intrinsically involved in the machine and you can feel everything that's going on. When the team are doing something that, maybe in theory over a race distance in the calculations is faster, and then they make a bit of a strange decision and you can't even push the car to its limit because whether they were lifting at the end of the straights, whether they had to go higher on tyre pressures to lift the car up, which meant the tyres went out of the operating window. That's speculation. Only Ferrari will know that, really. But it looked like they definitely had to do something at the end of the race for that car issue. And I think the plank wear is a good solution. I don't know whether that is actually the cause, but it'll be something like that. Then yes, whether Charles should have been that public in his opinion giving, maybe he should have saved that for the debrief. But hey, it makes great entertainment for us, and we can speculate on it all we want.
Yeah, and all for the George Russell haters who think that he screams down to try and get people penalties, they'll be pleased to know that obviously Charles Leclerc did get a 5-second penalty for moving under braking, which
that was
I think
bad.
He did a couple of times there. So not great from him, but I guess he was frustrated. That rounds up the on-track recap, looking back at the Hungarian Grand Prix this last weekend. One last thing, in fact, 2 last things I'll say. Well done to British driver James Headley, got his best ever result in FIA F3, which you were commentating on, coming 4th after qualifying on the front row of the grid in the sprint race. And also, if you do go to the Hungaroring, and we've been there, Piers, you'll know that there's an incredible amount of food there and options that you can go for. Obviously, when the F1's there, there's even more. £40 for a hot dog and wedges.
You what?
Yeah. I didn't have one, but a bloke I was chatting to was absolutely livid because he thought, hang on a minute, Hungary, yeah, it's relatively cheap compared to the UK. He spent 40 quid on it. It looked like a very nice hot dog, and it was certainly a large portion.
I should hope so.
but that's more expensive. When people say Hungary is cheap, that's more expensive than Silverstone. So there we go. Just watch your conversion, your currency conversions when you go to different races in different countries. We'll be back, of course, next week here on Track on the radio show version, and we'll be back on the talkSPORT Driving YouTube channel with more content, and then we'll look back at the next Grand Prix coming up in a few weeks after the summer break, which is the Dutch Grand Prix. Thank you very much to Piers, and we'll see you soon.